Happy Lent to you all. You know what a beautiful season is. We get to renew our prayer lives. We get to fast from things that are unhealthy or that we need to sort of purify. And also we need to be charitable towards others, even by word, by time, or by treasure. Now, St. Francis of Assisi, when he was younger, liked to be the center of attention, and liked to be the center of the party, and loved to party. And most of us love to party. But, part of the partying is about community, being together. But for Francis, this wasn't enough. So he wanted more attention. So he decided to go to war. He went to war against neighboring Prussia. But then after that didn't work out, he was going to go to war again, but God turned him around. And this was the beginning of Francis' change in life. It was kind of his rock bottom, so to speak, where, okay, I've tried it my way. Now let's try it God's way. And what we also are constantly trying to do this in our own lives as Christian people, is set aside our own way to follow God's way. Now let's all admit, in the first reading from the book of Genesis, first I should point out there's the original blessing of being alive. Despite our sinfulness, despite our weaknesses, despite all the wrongdoings that go on in the world, it is still good to be alive. Let us always give thanks to God for the gift of life, the original blessing and the blessing of each child that's born. And then we can also be mindful that this simple little commandment, simple little temptation reminds us that a lot of times, and I always think of our disputes with others. They're often over very simple things. These aren't big, and dramatic things. These are often very simple. And yet what we have to do is we have to constantly renew ourselves, refocus ourselves on God, the God who is merciful, the God who is loving, and let go of a lot of these little things that we hold on to. Let go and let God, as the slogan says. But this is the reality of life. There's constantly for us, there's a falling and there's a rising, and this is part of life. And, I once heard it said this, of course we're going to fall at some point, but it's how we get up, how we respond to the grace of God, which really relates to part of the temptation that Jesus faces, is that if you are the Son of God, the devil has mentioned that 2 different times. If you are the Son of God, and says the same thing to us. If you are a child of God. In other words, the first temptation is about our identity. Do we really hold firm that we are children of God? We are sons and daughters of God. We are loved with no conditions, unconditional love. Do we really embrace that, and do we really cherish that? Because that's what we'll all be tempted, is to dismiss that. Oh no, I'm a ragged sinner, or I'm no good for nothing, or did you see what I did last Friday night? Whatever, and the list goes on. And yet we are beloved sons and daughters by the fact that we exist. And this is the identity for every single human being. This is the way we ought to look at every single human being, as a beloved child of God. The first temptation is about, food. And Jesus is hungry at this point. Rightfully, I would have changed those stones into some bread, gluten-free bread, mind you. But there's the first temptation. But Jesus will, it's interesting that Jesus will feed the multitudes later on in the gospel, but this is rooted in compassion and also community. Jesus is always having compassion on people, and Jesus is always trying to build community or include people who are excluded back into the community. It's a real challenge for us. Of course, we have to challenge one another's behavior, but we have to try our best to include others. And then the second temptation is really about fame. Do something dramatic to draw the people to you. And Jesus is going to let that one go. Jesus will be famous at certain parts of of the Gospels, there's lots of people that are going to follow him, but this isn't what he's all about. And ultimately, when he goes to the cross, there's next to no one. There's only a small group of people that are actually with him in his true moment of fame on the tree of life that gives love and forgiveness to us. And then the last temptation is to be, the powerful one over all. Now, Jesus is powerful, but it's more of a power of mercy and a power of love. It's never a power of dominance. And so how easy we try to dominate other people in our lives, even in those simple little ways, like I say, those little disputes. It's really about us trying to power over each other. We have to just simply let that go. And so as we gather around the table of the Lord, we're offered the body and blood of Christ to reawaken that we truly are beloved sons and daughters of God. And God is present with us in our times of temptation, in our times of trial, so that we can truly give thanks for the gift of life and we can go out and be life-giving towards others.